All right, so we're here doing part 2 of the Mandalorian edit. If you missed part 1, just click, it'll be somewhere here, or just go in my playlist and you'll find part 1 of this. But here's the before image right here, and here is the after image. So we basically took an image of toys and we're creating this really cool composite. So let's go ahead and get started with part 2. So now let's go ahead and add the highlights to all of these images, and we're gonna start. This is more like detail work. So once you've put in all the pieces, you've placed them where you want, you're gonna start making it match up. So we've already kind of added the colors, now let's add the highlights. So here on the Mandalorian, I'm gonna add a blank layer and just call it highlight. And we're gonna turn this to an overlay blending mode, and we're gonna paint with the color of the fire here. So hold down Option, and you're just gonna pick kind of like an orange color right there. And make sure you're on your highlight layer, and you're just going to be painting. Actually, I'm at 100% opacity. Let's bring this down to about 50. And kind of make your brush a little bit bigger, and you're just going to be painting right here. And then a little bit on here where there's the highlights. And once again, just right there, bam, bam. Okay, so now this is looking more realistic, like the fire is sort of shining on his armor. Now, also, same thing on Yoda. I'm going to create a blank layer here, call it, this is going to be my highlight layer. And same thing, we're gonna go to an overlay blending mode, and we're just gonna paint in a little bit right here, some of this brightness. You don't wanna paint too much because then it starts looking a little bit weird, and it's already looking a tiny bit weird, so I'm gonna go to my eraser at about 20% opacity right there, and just kind of dab around there to erase. So here you can see before and after, that's looking great. Now down to the cape. And I'm actually going to bring this blank layer above everything, just because you don't want it to be below that black layer, or else it's not going to show up. So go down to overlay blending mode, same thing. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, so that's a little bit too strong. So what I'm going to do is bring that down just a little bit, something like that. Okay, now over the top of everything, we want to do the same thing. We're starting to add in effects. You know, we've been doing detail effects. Now we're going to add effects over the whole image. So we're going to add a haze. We're going to add 2 layers. One is going to be sort of like a haze layer. I'm actually going to add 2 haze layers. So hold down Option to copy that down. So you can see 2 haze layers. And these are both going to be a little bit different. One's going to be screen, and one is going to be a overlay blending mode. Now these do 2 different things. Screen will add this hazy type look. Let me show you what we're gonna do here. Go to your brush, and we're gonna pick kind of like an orange, it's like, sort of like a darker orange. Let's make it a little bit more like a yellow, like yellow orange, okay? So this is gonna be kind of the haze from the fire coming off. See that? That's just the haze, perfect. Now, you go up to our other layer, which is an overlay blending mode, and this is going to do something different. So if you see here, I'm going to dab. It's adding more color, and it's just more intense. So that's what we want, just right around there, just like that. Okay, so that's going to sort of create that hazy look. Without it, it looks kind of fake, totally fake. With it, it looks like the fire's actually there. And then you can mess around with these. If you want, you can select both of them, hit Command T, and you can sort of manipulate them how you want, you know. So I'm holding down Shift here on the new Photoshop. Makes you do that if you want to just do custom dimensions. So just something like that. And this, you might want to make this a little bit more like red or orange or whatever. So if you want to do that, create a hue and saturation layer above one of these, above your screen blending mode layer. And then you're just gonna adjust this just like that. Okay, so there you go. I add a little bit more reds into that. So before and after. This next part is gonna be dodging and burning to create more depth, because now some of the pieces are flat. Everything about compositing is, we're trying to blend, you know, the depth, the colors, and all that, the brightness, shadows. So here we're gonna create a blank layer. This is how you, or sorry, not a blank layer. We're gonna create a curves adjustment layer. And I'm just gonna add some darks into this. We're going to be burning. So burning dark, like you're burning toast. We're going to bring that curves adjustment layer down, and then I'm going to hit Command I to invert it. This is how you create a base layer for dodging and burning. And then here you're going to be painting with white. So you're going to be revealing what's on this layer. So let's go to white, make my brush smaller, and I'm going to be painting at about 20-something%. And here, if I turn this on and off, it's not doing anything. You're just gonna be revealing some of those shadows underneath. So here, I'm basically gonna go wherever it needs more contrast. You can see how it's really hazy up here. I'm just gonna make my brush a little bit bigger, and I'm painting in some of that dark on that layer, just like that. Now, look, this image isn't the best quality because I got off Unsplash and it's hard to find Mandalorian images. And I don't have a Mandalorian toy, so it makes it a little bit difficult. But when the photographer that shot this, I don't know what he was doing because it's like, look at that blur. It's crazy. We're gonna be fixing that later. But for now, let's just go over some of the dark spots here to make the Mandalorian pop out of the background a little bit more. So right now he's flat, and this burning that I'm doing here, it's just this is very basic dodging and burning. I'm going over this really quick. Usually I spend a lot more time on this, but you know, this image of the Mandalorian is kind of crap, so that's why I'm kind of rushing on this. Okay, so you can see what I'm doing here, basically going around, focusing on like the shadows, just making those pop a little bit more, and that's gonna create depth. Now this side doesn't really matter because I'll show you in just a minute. We're gonna be adding some motion blur to make that match. But for now, I think we're really close. We're gonna add some more darks right here. This is gonna add depth also here, bam, adding depth. I'm doing this really, really quick. And let's check this out. Let's see what effect this has. So without and then with makes it look way more realistic, adds way more depth, especially on this side where it definitely needs it, right there. Okay, so same thing to Yoda. We're gonna create a curves adjustment layer, do the same exact thing. Okay, next let's manipulate the cape just a little bit to make this look a little bit better. I'm gonna go up to, let's see, actually edit. We're gonna warp this, transform and warp. And we're gonna warp this down just slightly, just like that. So it's looking a little bit more realistic. Hit enter. So before and after, I think after looks a little bit better. And then I want to make the Mandalorian pop out of the background a little bit. This is something that I usually do on my images just to focus and bring the attention to the subject. I will add a blank layer behind the Mandalorian, behind the cape and everything, just call this haze. And I'm going to paint with a white brush right here. So white color at about 27 something opacity. I'm just going to dab a little bit. So it's very, very faint. But what it's doing is it's making the subject pop out and your eye goes to the Mandalorian. Check this out. Before, it's kind of blending in too much. After, bam, he's popping out of the background. It makes it look like there's more depth. So that's a really cool, super easy trick that I do. Next, we're gonna add some coloring over the top of this, and then we're gonna be bringing in our gunfire layer to make the whole thing action-packed. Next, we're gonna add a color balance layer above everything. Now I'm gonna make it a little bit more blue, again, something right around here, and then we're going to go to the highlights, and let's add in a little bit of yellow, because sometimes when you make it too blue, you still need to bring back those highlights, Right now they're a little bit green, so I'm gonna add in a little bit of yellow, just like that. And see, that's making it pop. It's looking more like a nighttime image, and we're still gonna add some stuff over the top. So go back to a color balance layer again. So that was my first layer. Second layer, we're gonna add a little bit more. I wanna make this a little bit more intense. And usually I do this, I add different layers just because I can really go back and manipulate it. This is sort of part of my whole flow because, for example, if I like the first one, then I'm gonna leave it. Then I add a second one and I'm like, I'm not sure if I like that or not. So in the whole process, I'm turning off layers, I'm duplicating layers. This is sort of my, how I color. Let's add one more color balance layer to just mess around with this and see how this looks. Let's add a little bit of red for the fire. Something right around there. It's adding in a little bit more red. So you might be thinking, I'm going back and forth here. Like I start with sort of this red image, check this out, sort of this reddish image, and then I'm adding some cyans and greens, and then I add some blues, and then I bring back in the reds. But check this out. The difference is it seems like I'm just like taking out the color and adding it back in. But check this out. The before looks like this, and it's kind of dull. The highlights aren't popping. So I added a lot of highlight layers, and now things are different. It's adding in a little bit more blue. It's making it pop a lot more. So that's why I keep adding these color balance layers on top of each other. So then I'm gonna add some highlights to this layer. maybe something right around there, and then some reds and some yellows. So there you go. It's looking a lot better. So once again, before the color layers and then after, things are popping a lot more. Now still a little bit blue, so one last layer, and we're gonna add in some reds, something right around there, and then add in some yellows. Okay, so let's see what that does. There you go. So now once again, before it's a little bit dark, after it's popping a lot more, and it's looking really nice. You know, we have that red flare from the explosion. Okay, now the action comes in. We're gonna go and get our gunfire layer here. This is a file that I've included. I've created these gunfire sort of flashes or whatever, which is kind of cool. So you can download those. Remember, click the link below. I'll give you all these assets, the brushes, everything I'm using. And actually, I don't have any brushes I'm using here, but mainly the gunfire asset here. Okay, so bring that over the top. And now we are going to put masks. So I'm actually going to group these. So hold Shift to select all those, hit Command G, and these are going to be called gunfire. And actually, let's bring the gunfire layer below the coloring layer, because see, we want those to be colored just like the rest of the image right there. Okay, so I'm going to go into this group, and you want to just really adjust this layer to your liking. So the cool thing about this is you can hit Command T and you can make things smaller, you can make them bigger, oblong, whatever you want. So I'm gonna sort of place these, just give me a minute and I'll be back. Okay, so once you have all these placed, I just wanna change the color of this a little bit. It's a little too yellow, maybe I'll add some reds in. So go down here, you wanna make sure you're above your gunfire layer, and go to Hue Saturation and make sure this is a clipping mask. So you're affecting only the gunfire layer. And we're gonna bring these, see how it's making it a little red or whatever. Let's see if we go, so actually it is a little bit too red over here. So let's bring this over a little bit, just something like that. It's a little bit more like yellowish. So it matches the explosion over here, kind of like yellow-orange. So before it's a little bit red, after it's matching a little bit more. Okay, now we're gonna make just a few minor adjustments, changing a few colors here and there. And I'm noticing here on this, this is my dodge, this is my burn layer above the Mandalorian. I'm actually gonna copy that down and see what that does. So I kind of like that. It's adding a little bit more contrast. Also on the cape, we're going to maybe make it a little bit darker like that. Let's add a little bit more reds into the haze right up here. So haze, let's add a little bit more reds, just like that. So it looks a little bit more intense. And the haze layer, I'm gonna hold down Shift and bring this over just a little bit. See, so here, I wanna bring it over the Mandalorian just a little bit more, just like that. And let's add a little bit more contrast over the whole entire image. So I'm gonna go to the very top and go to Curves, Adjustment Layer, and we're gonna bring down just slightly shadows there and the highlights just right there. So there's a little bit more contrast there. It's kind of nice. Let's just reduce the opacity slightly. Okay, so now for the final step is we are going to copy up everything that we have right down here. We're gonna copy it to the top. So an easy way to do that is hold down Shift, Option, Command E if you're on a Mac. That's the easy way to do it. The more cumbersome way is to hold down Shift, select everything, hold down Option, you can copy it up. So now we have 2 copies. Make sure to merge all these copies, so hit Command E. That'll merge them. So either way, it doesn't really matter how you do it, but just create a blank copy above, and I'm gonna call this our blur layer. And blur layer, we're gonna go to Filter, go down to Blur, Motion Blur. Now I'm gonna blur this at 115 pixels in sort of this direction, the same direction as the gunfire, and hit OK. And then we're gonna put a mask over this. Now remember, we have a finished layer, you know, all this below is finalized. So here what we're gonna do is we're just gonna paint out a little bit right here. Okay, right around the Mandalorian's head. Now I'm gonna hit 3 on the keyboard to go to 30% opacity, and we're gonna get rid of some of the blur in the background there. And just sort of dab around this area. There you go, so something like that. So now it looks like Remember how I said we were gonna fix this blur over here? Now we've fixed it because now everything's blurring and it's looking pretty good. So now it looks like he's in the action of the whole shot. So there you guys go. That's how you create a very simple composite using toys. And I didn't even shoot these toys, but you could go out and shoot your own toys, whatever. But you know, it makes it pretty fun, and hopefully you guys enjoy the tutorial. So once again, if you want to get the follow along files, click the link below. To get those, I'll give you, the fire brushes or whatever I was using here, the gunfire and all that. And make sure to check out some of my other videos. Okay, talk to you guys soon.